The Alamo, the Mexican army. Santa Anna had taken his brother-in-law's General Cost's defeat in San Antonio personally. He raised an army of about 6,000 soldiers and marched north in the dead of winter. It was a terrible winter and it snowed in South Texas and northern Mexico. Santa Anna had lost hundreds of men on its march northward to sickness and exposure, but managed to arrive in Texas in February of 1836. Santa Anna then decided to split his army into two. General Urrea was to take South Texas, while Santa Anna focused on taking control of San Antonio. San Antonio and the Alamo. In San Antonio, William Barrett Travis and James Bowie were the co-commanders of the Texas forces in San Antonio and used the Alamo mission as their base. They had about 150 soldiers to protect the city. Travis was in charge of the regulars, soldiers who had signed a commitment to serve the government of Texas, and Bowie was in charge of the volunteer militia. They would often argue over who was in command. Here is a picture of the mission for this Alamo. You will notice that the Alamo is fortified with about 20 cannons around the perimeter, and the Texians had control of this particular fort since the battle in San Antonio of December of 1835. The two arrows indicate the most weakest spots of the Alamo. Both sides would actually be open to attack during the battle. The strength of the Alamo is that they had 12-foot walls, and the walls were actually 2 to 3 feet thick, so they could withstand artillery shells. 20 cannons bristled from the Alamo, and this made it one of the most strongest fortifications in South Texas. The weaknesses of the Alamo was that it required too much space to defend. Over 3 acres of the Alamo existed, and they had less than 200 men to defend it. A piece of the south wall between the chapel and the main wall was built of fence planks and dirt. And with Gonzales 71 miles away and Goliad 95 miles away, reinforcements would be tough to come by quickly. When Santa Anna arrived in February of 23rd of 1836, the Texans were totally surprised, and they immediately rushed into the Alamo for safety as they could not hold the town of San Antonio. Bowie tried to parlay a discussion between the enemies for good terms of surrender with the Mexican army. This actually upset Travis, who considered himself in charge, and therefore he responded by ordering a cannon to be fired at the Mexicans, ending any hope of peaceful and resolution, and more or less said that there would be no surrender. Colonel Travis was able to dispatch riders carrying letters to General Houston and other Texians describing of the situation and requesting help. Travis and Bowie desperately needed more soldiers. Juan Seguin and James Butler Bonham served as letter carriers and slipped past the Mexican lines. Seguin was not allowed to return by Houston's orders, and Bonham returned after delivering his message, even though he knew he faced certain death. This is a letter of the first letter that was sent to Houston from Travis. Commander of Bayard, 3 o'clock p.m. The many enemy in large forces are in sight. We want men and provisions. Send them to us. We have 150 men and are determined to defend the Alamo to the last. Give us assistance, William Barrett Travis. This is the more famous letter that made it out of the Alamo. In this letter, here is the statement. Travis sent this most famous letter on the second day of the siege. To the people of Texas and all Americans in the world, February 24th, 1836. Fellow citizens and compatriots, I am besieged by 1,000 or more of the Mexicans under Santa Anna. I have sustained a continual bombardment and cannonade for 24 hours and have not lost a man. The enemy has demanded a surrender at discretion, and otherwise the garrison are to be put to sword if the fort is taken. I have answered the demand with a cannon shot, and our flag still waves proudly from the walls. I shall never surrender or retreat. I call on you in the name of liberty, of patriotism, and everything dear to the American character to come to our aid with all dispatch. The enemy is receiving reinforcements daily and will no doubt increase to 3,000 or 4,000 in 4 or 5 days. If this call is neglected, I am determined to sustain myself as long as possible and die like a soldier who never forgets what is due to his own honor and that of his country. Victory or death. William Barrett Travis. After the Mexicans arrived on February 23rd, they settled into a siege of the Alamo. They flew a red flag, which meant no quarter, no mercy, and no prisoners. During the 13-day siege, the Mexican army inched closer and closer to the Alamo walls. They fired cannons at the fort day and night and harassed the defenders by having the Mexican military band play a song titled El Deguelo, which meant slit the throat. By the 24th of February, James Bowie had become extremely sick and was bedridden for the rest of the siege. Another blow for the Travis came on March 1st when the reinforcements came from Gonzales, but it was only 32 men, known as the Immortal 32. How many Texans were at the Alamo? The traditional number of defenders is 189, but some estimates range up to as many as 250 volunteers held the fort. The Assault of the Alamo. Santa Anna decided to assault the Alamo on March 6. At 5 a.m., 2,000 Mexicans attacked on all four sides. The Texians put up a noble fight but stood no chance. They were completely outnumbered, more than 10 to 1. The battle lasted no more than 90 minutes and every Texian defender was killed. Santa Anna had ordered no quarter, which meant take no prisoners. This is a representation of the actual battle. Travis is one of the first Texians to be killed. According to his slave Joe, who survived the battle, Travis was shot in the head in a few minutes on the north wall. Bowie was too sick to fight and is killed in his bed. Movie accounts show him firing pistols at oncoming Mexicans, but there is no evidence to support this. How did Crockett die? It's a mystery. There are many different opinions on this. Some think that he survived the battle along with a few others and was executed afterwards. Others think he died defending the Palisades. Still others think that as many as 60 of the defenders, including Crockett, jumped the walls to escape during the assault and were killed outside the walls of the Alamo. Many Mexican soldiers' versions exist, but in the confusion of battle, no one account stands out. Aftermath of the battle. Not everyone in the Alamo died. About 20 or so non-combatants, usually women, children, and slaves, were spared by Santa Anna, including Susanna Dickinson and Travis's slave Joe. Santa Anna told Susanna Dickinson to tell Texas General Houston and the Americans in Texas about what had happened at the Alamo, and that if any Americans didn't leave Texas, the same thing would happen to them as well. This is the Alamo defenders' ashes at San Fernando Cathedral in San Antonio. How many Mexicans were killed in the battle? The number of Mexicans killed in the siege and the battle is probably between 200 and 600. Santa Anna did not bring medical supplies with him, and because of this, his men who suffered bad wounds would die instead of being saved by medical treatment. This ends our presentation, and I'll follow up with another presentation later.